Welcome to another exciting episode of the NIDS View, a weekly show of the National Institute for Deterrence Studies, where we are advancing peace, promoting stability, and helping you to think deterrence. Each week, we will discuss and analyze a recent topic and provide insight to how it affects our national deterrence. The view of the hosts and guests are their own. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the NIDS View, a production of the NIDS Podcasting Network, your 2026 resource for understanding deterrence and strengthening your strategic thinking. I'm Jim Petrosky, President and co-founder of the National Institute for Deterrence Studies, along with Vice President for Education, the insightful, highly experienced, and yet sometimes jovial Curtis McGiffin.
I'm always jovial.
Yeah, okay. We'll get rid of the sometimes in that intro.
I'm sometimes the other things, but I'm always jovial.
Okay, fair enough. Now our audience knows. Well, today we have a special, very, very special guest, Rob Maness, who is one of our own senior fellows with our organization. And he, for those that don't know him, Rob brings extensive experience of national security, military leadership, and strategic analysis, and he's somewhat politically connected as well. Brings all those things to the table. He's a retired Air Force colonel, seasoned expert in defense policy, and the host of his own influential podcast, The Rob Maness Show, which, by the way, I listen to quite a lot and actually take some of my learning from your podcast. So thanks for teaching me there, Rob. And so anyway, you can learn more about his work at www.robmaness, ROBMANESS.com, and hear about all his podcasts and some of the great writings and interviews you've done on there, Rob. So how are you today, Rob? Let's let you introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, thanks, James and Curtis. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm always excited to get to spend time on this show with you all because I don't get to talk to folks from my profession every day. You mentioned the political stuff that I do. Most of the time I'm having to talk to people in the political world, but I try to get my guests on my show that are occasionally from the profession. My last show from this past Monday was with Captain John Conrad with a K. He is the founder and editor of G Captain, Merchant Marine Captain. But we were talking all things maritime strategy and maritime dominance in Greenland and why it's important from the perspective of Greenland. So every once in a while, I get to sit and chat just one-on-one with somebody that I consider from the national security profession. I appreciate you guys having me on. For those that don't know, I was enlisted in bomb disposal, EOD, at age 17, finished college at night school, and got commissioned and trained as a nav in navigator training. Flew in the KC-135, where I was in Strategic Air Command, pulled nuclear alert, alpha alert, as a tanker navigator. And right as SAC and TAC merged, I went to fly in the backseat of the B-1 bomber. And I did qualify as a nuclear certified mission ready B-1 crew member just before the B-1 was decertified to carry nuclear weapons. So I did qualify as a bomber nuclear operator, in addition to being a tanker SAC guy. So I have an understanding of the single integrated operational plan fairly well from that perspective, from a crew member's perspective, and from a staff perspective too. As a major after ACSC, Air Command Staff College, I went and worked on the Joint Staff in it used to be J38 Nuclear Operations Division. Mm-hmm. And I was primarily responsible for the executive oversight as a major, believe it or not, of the NATO nuclear command and control system, but later got pulled into helping write the first theater nuclear war plan for a certain country that may or may not be in the Pacific region. After I left that, I went on to command a B-1 bomber squadron. Went to Navy War College and learned all about the Navy, which includes their nuclear submarines, by the way, nuclear missile submarines especially, which I had known a little bit from EOD school. You touch every nuclear weapon system at EOD school when I was 17. So I have a really good understanding of most of the systems and the warheads and those kind of things that were known then. And then I went to Navy War College. After that, worked as the vice wing commander at the 55th Wing at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. And in that job, I was responsible for the facility at U.S. STRATCOM headquarters, the old SAC headquarters building. And we helped do the planning and design of the new building that's out there. It looks like a big crystal Taj Mahal Now, I was just out there a few months ago for the first time since they built it. Worked out exactly as we had planned. We eliminated one golf course and put a brand new building there.
I know where that is.
When I was
It's hard to do.
Rob, when I sat alert at Offutt in the early 90s on the Looking Glass, we would golf on that golf course while on alert.
I golfed on that golf course. Not very good, but I did golf on it a few times.
The Warrior 9,
really
I think
pissed.
it was.
General
Yes.
Ray had that put in there right behind the
Yep.
officers club. He'd be pissed if he knew that we did away with it, but we did. After that job, I got asked to go down to help start up A58 at Global Strike Command. I was the programming part of it, so my team put the first POM together, pulled all the assets from the other bases and commands, and created the Global Strike Command force structure. And then part of my other job was laying down requirements for new weapon systems that were going to come out. We did hypersonics. We did B-21. It wasn't B-21. It was long range strike bomber, I think is what it was
Right.
called.
Yes.
Those kind of things. So we did that. And then my last job was a wing commander at Kirtland Air Force Base, which has, I believe it has the largest nuclear mission of any type in the world.
I think it does.
So,
Yeah, that's right.
so a lot of good times there, and a lot of NSIs and SAC IGs and check rides and those kind of things. But it's all been great. It's been great. I feel very privileged and honored to have a background in this field. There aren't very many of us left. Quite frankly, the folks that trained us are on their way out if they haven't left already. And it's very important for the country to continue having folks that have an expertise in this area, I think.
Wow, Rob, you have quite a background. That's incredible.
Well,
I know you share a lot with Curtis here. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add into our listeners. This is why Rob is a senior fellow here at NIDS, because he has a nuclear deterrence background amidst all the other things, which I think he left out. I think you ran for Senate in Louisiana and did some other things, and you're kind of integrated into the sort of the political world now, and I often see you on different television channels doing hits on commentary on national security and other related issues, and you're just a wealth of knowledge, and the backgrounds connection that we have with you really sort of helps link us together in that way. So I'm just excited to have you here. I think we've flown the same skies. We've definitely run across. We weren't at Offutt at the same time, but we have certainly driven the same parking lots while we were
the same tail numbers.
Probably have. So very, very excited to have you here. So thanks again.
Well, good. And we could probably talk about our backgrounds and crossings.
Oh yeah, we're going to run out of time.
Show, and we're going to run out of time. So let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of the topic we sort of prepared for. Although this is sort of fun too. But let's dive into some of the national security strategy topics broadly and explore some of the connections and recent developments, especially evolving dynamics in the Arctic security and great power competition the world's going through now. And so to get the conversation started, Rob, let's give us a few words of wisdom, because you talked about your great background on your view of deterrence today, as opposed to what it was like decades ago, and where you think we're headed. And then we'll sort of move that into where we are now and talk about it in general, because you have a lot of background I think a lot of people don't have. So go ahead and share that with us.
Well, I think some key words or some lessons to be learned from the new national security strategy that Elbridge Colby, the Undersecretary of War Policy, and his team put out. I think it was December, maybe.
Yeah,
25,
November, I
too
think.
long
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
There's some key things. The key words that everybody needs to remember is this phrase. You and the three of us, we know what it is: peace through strength,
Right?
because that's what we grew up in. But that really is, in fact, the focus of the new national security strategy, and will be when the national military strategy is published eventually. I'm confident that it will continue to be that focus. And here's why. Because the world has changed. In the early 1990s, we went from a Cold War that we all participated in, a lot of us did, we were facing down the Soviet communists primarily. not all of our adversaries were Soviet communists, but most of them were linked to them. And that ideology, that was an aggressive ideology. It was empirical. They wanted to gain territory, countries, and capability, and those kind of things, and challenge us everywhere in the world. To this phase in the 90s and 2000s of the world being perceived by the elites as one that's becoming more peaceful, and folks in power, especially the political world, wanted to take the United States down a road that focused less on being strong enough to deter an enemy, no matter whether that enemy existed or one that might arise, to being a lesser capable national security team member for our allies. And we started getting involved after 2000 and 9/11 in these wars that heretofore the United States had not been involved in endless wars other than the Vietnam War, which took a lot of effort on our society to end. And we still have scars from that today, no matter what you're talking about. And now we find ourselves in 2026 after 2 decades of these endless war policies, and found that the outcome of those endless war policies is that we are weaker from a military perspective, even though we have the most powerful military in the world and the most capable military in the world so far. China is challenging us on that, quite frankly, if we are honest with ourselves. But we are weaker from a military perspective, but primarily from a political perspective. The perspective of political will is where our weakness lies, and our adversaries see that. And along those years, what has China been doing? China has been growing its military forces aggressively. And my opinion, that I think that their nuclear capability that they've grown over the last 15 years is devalued, undervalued, and underestimated in the public eye.
Oh, yes.
And is much greater than what the elites and those in charge of official information allow to be not only let out to the public, but to be used in planning documents like the National Security Strategy and the National Military Strategy, the Future Nuclear Posture Review, those kind of things. So all of that has an impact. And we find ourselves in the world today where when Iran shut their airspace down just in the last 7 days, the only aircraft, there were 12 of them, I think, at last count, that flew in and out of that airspace during that time were Chinese military aircraft.
That's telling, isn't it?
That is very telling. That's I mean, it's not exactly nuclear related, but it is nuclear related. You guys know that. So that's the perspective of the geopolitical climate that we find ourselves in. And this new national security strategy hits. Trump has been reelected based on partly on this message, peace through strength, in a historic reelection. It's only happened one other time in our country's history for a reason. You have to have a really powerful message. And the message is from the Trump administration is, we're going to focus on, here are our priorities, the Western Hemisphere first. Why is that? Why did they choose the Western Hemisphere first? Well, maybe because John Quincy Adams had a good point when he developed the Monroe Doctrine, and because a new colonial power has emerged to challenge us in the Western Hemisphere, and it's not Russia. It wanted to be Russia or the Soviet Union back in the day, but it's not. It's really China. When this administration took over, China was in control of both corporations at each end of the Panama Canal. That's why you saw a huge focus on the Panama Canal, and that's the world's key choke point from a United States perspective, both from a military perspective, but also an economic perspective. And as you guys know, whoever controls the choke points in the world controls the world, economically and militarily.
Rob, I have a question though, and it's regarding this because I think it's important, and we saw that, and I always use Panama as the good example because I do think it's a good example of putting your thumb where it matters most. You call it the choke point, and I agree. And your argument is a compelling one to see a new colonial force that's trying to move into our hemisphere. But why? What makes it so difficult to bring that back to bring that to the average citizen who I don't think sees that? Where you and Curtis and I, all three of us, we grew up in a time when that was sort of understood. That was part of our persona, that we as a society had these responsibilities. How do you think that gets lost, or how do we think we regain that as we move forward?
Well, the messaging needs to link, the issue of Panama Canal with what the consumer in America sees every single day. There should be messaging on this church invasion that occurred in Minneapolis a few days ago, because what those people are doing is they're challenging enforcement of immigration law, which is a moral set of laws passed in a bipartisan way, is not a Trump-only law. He's just got a program to enforce it. That is intrinsically linked to our efforts to secure the Western Hemisphere and make that our priority. Because it's linked to China, and it's linked to Russia, and it's linked to enemies like Iran, and it has a direct impact on the consumer in their pocketbook and in their feeling of safety in their society. And I would encourage much more messaging and better messaging to show how these links occur. The Chinese sent in, some estimates put it at around 100,000 Chinese military-age males came through the southern border during the Biden years when it was wide open. So they're bouncing around loose inside the country. And when you have situations where you have American citizens that are organizing to challenge the federal government, like what's happening, I mean, we have a state of insurrection by the governor of Minnesota and the mayor of Minneapolis right now. That's what really exists right now. Now, the president hasn't chosen to use the Insurrection Act, but it's there. Well, as you and I know, the communists, when they've infiltrated a society that they want to win the war over through influence and propaganda and those kind of things, one of the things they do is they take advantage of those Americans that are in opposition to a government policy that becomes highly emotional. They did it during the civil rights activity in the 1960s. Did they win that? I don't think so, but they caused a lot of damage, and it took a lot longer to rectify the situation, and we still live with some negative impacts of that today. So linking that and messaging the American people about what's going on needs to happen. Unfortunately, though, we have politicians in Congress that push back when groups like the Committee on the Present Danger of China, which I'm a founding member of, I'm a plank holder of that group, which was based on the Committee on the Present Danger Soviet Union originally that Reagan used for his appointees. Well, the CPDC has been talking to Congress people, including the chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence on the Chinese Communist Party for years and years and years to do things like remove the requirement for the thrift savings plan to invest in Chinese companies, because the American people may not know this on average, but we know that a Chinese company is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and or the People's Liberation Army. All of them have members that are part of these companies, but our politicians have let those companies trade on our stock exchange without being required to be audited like every other company, including American ones, is required to do. It's that kind of challenging environment that we find ourselves in even today. And President Trump's moving this forward, starting with the Western Hemisphere, to put a spotlight on these issues vis-a-vis China and what the negative impact is on our economy, our national security, and our society in general, I think is the right way to go. But we got to get better at messaging.
Yeah, I think to your point, Rob, I think we don't do a very good job of linking domestic reality to foreign policy. And with regard to the China thing, I think one of the problems here is that the world still, I think, operates under the idea that China is still treated as an emerging country. So it gets all these special privileges. It is the second, depending upon how you calculate, it's the second largest economy in exchange rate. If you've purchased power parity, it's the largest economy in the world. Yeah. And yet it's treated as if it's a third world country, coming out of Central Africa. It is just not that way. And so I think one of the things that we should be looking at in order to address this national security issue is start looking at how to reclassify China into a status where they are no longer treated in having these special treatments as an emerging economy. They just simply aren't anymore. It's time to move on in that regard. And I think this establishment, there's this new sort of appreciation, thanks to the Trump administration, the value of sovereignty. And this goes back to citizenship. When we dilute the value of citizenship through open migration, it impacts the feeling of sovereignty, the value of sovereignty by an individual citizen. And so if you don't feel sovereign, then you feel like there's nothing really to protect. And if you don't feel like you need to protect anything, then defense is ignored and so forth, and it cascades beyond there. And so I think, to your point, Rob, this really does connect very well from whether it's from the borders of Texas to the streets of Minneapolis, to the frozen tundra of Greenland, and to the lights of Paris. These things all connect in such a way that President Trump seems to see differently and is willing to communicate differently than any other president in our memory. And so I think that's where we're looking at. And Greenland is this sort of example of this idea that sovereignty matters, and either you assert it or you're going to lose it, depending upon your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I just did a show on Greenland and the maritime issue associated with it, Curtis. And you're exactly right. And just so folks know, the China threat, the Chinese Communist Party threat, is a key part of this. Let me explain why. Sovereignty matters because you can't count on another nation state. I don't care how close your alliance is with. It's just the way human nature works.
Yes.
The nation state is going to act in their own best interest before they do anything else, or they're going to commit suicide, one of the two. And here's how. Here's what's connected to the Arctic thing in Greenland. Carney up in Canada just signed a deal with China to bring in electric vehicles. Every one of those electric vehicles, by the way, is an intelligence collector. We should ban them from entering the United States of America. The Chinese have enough good intelligence on us by the people they have here in the farm they got near our bases, and the balloon,
the balloons, yes,
they did their thing. Thanks to Mark Kelly, who owns a company, is part owner of a balloon surveillance company. Anyway, so Carney has done that, and then Macron, the French president, says something very similar as to what he wants to do. We have to get closer to China, and the whole structure that some people refer to as the international order that was built post World War II, the
rules-based international order,
the rules-based international order. That whole structure comes down when states start acting naturally, which is to ensure that their vital interests are taken care of on behalf of their citizens first. That's the way of nation states, and why we have them was to protect citizens from various things, whether it's military attack or economic attack that causes poverty, anything like that, or their ability to fish in their own waters, those kinds of things. That's the purpose of a nation state, and it's my view, and I happen to agree with the Trump administration view. When you go back to the phrase "peace through strength," that strength is based on one country in our national security strategy, and it's the the United States of America. Can we work with allies? Of course we can work with allies. Do we want to work with allies and do burden sharing?
Yeah.
Yes. But what we have gotten ourselves into is an inability to manufacture all the things that will meet our vital national interest security needs right here in the United States. And different countries from different parts of the world, different governance systems, different ideologies control key strategic pieces of our supply chain, our manufacturing capability. And that is the first step to achieving peace through strength, is to get manufacturing reestablished here at home. And here's how Greenland ties into that. Now, this is not the only issue, but the rare earth minerals issue, 90-something% of the refining capability of that's in China.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there's a vast deposits of rare earth minerals in Greenland, and we need to reestablish our refining capability here at home in order to take advantage of that. And what we don't want to have happen is the Chinese be able to bully their way in either through their Belt and Road Initiative or just through sheer military coercion in order to do that. And the Chinese, and here's back to Greenland, there's a new route, ocean route across the Arctic Ocean that's been established. You have the Northwest Passage, and then the passage that goes along the other coast, which is Russia and Norway, and down into Europe. And then across the middle is the Arctic Sea route, which is new, relatively new. And the Chinese and the Russians have most of the icebreakers. Our icebreakers are broke, and we're struggling. The shipbuilder that won the contract to recover the struggling build of new icebreakers is right here in Mississippi, where I live in Gulfport, Mississippi. Bollinger Shipyards, thank God. I know the Bollingers. They're good shipbuilders, so they'll get the job done. But we need them, and we need them now, because the Chinese and the Russians are establishing this superhighway across the Arctic Sea route, and that gives them very close access to Greenland and those rare earth minerals, and the ability to negotiate from a position of strength if we don't intervene and take a look at getting control over that. I'm a fan of buying it, like has been tried several times, like we did Alaska.
Yep.
We should buy it and make it U.S. territory. That would solve a lot of those issues. And that's not the only issue, but it's an economic issue and a power projection issue. You know,
Rob, one of the things that I saw with Greenland, and it sort of shows up here, and it's rather interesting for discussion, is when you make an agreement with someone, and we'll take Greenland. If Greenland makes an agreement with China to sell them whatever, the problem is when the agreement goes sour, they don't have the ability to force the agreement. Okay. And that's the problem. And then, but then you turn around to the United States, when we try to force an agreement, for example, Venezuela and oil, putting oil companies and oil industry in Venezuela, and then it's taken out from under us. We have to be able to enforce it. You can't enforce. It goes back to the citizenry part you talked about, just, in what's going on in Minneapolis. But if you can't have a law that you're enforcing, if you don't have an agreement that you can enforce, then whoever can enforce their will ends up being the answer. And that is not in our strategic interest if we are going to be able or have it to go alone. How does this get done in the political world where it seems like it just falls apart when we talk about enforcing a rule that people agreed to, but now they don't, right?
Yeah. Well, the strong usually win. And I don't mean strong militarily necessarily, but that's part of it. But the strong in political willpower usually win. A lot of people get confused about Mr. Trump and his negotiating style. The Greenland case is a classic example of art of the deal. He goes in hard with something outrageous. He gets a reaction to that. If it's not what he likes, he goes in and gives a little bit of a view as to what he really wants to do, but not enough. And if the whiners and squealers still don't respond in a way that he sees as positive, he comes back in hard again, and even worse. And then when they keep squealing and all that, eventually he goes on and he goes, okay, here's what I want to do. And in this case, what he did is he said, okay, I want to buy this for 170 billion. I think, I'm not sure exact number, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. And the Denmark folks go, oh, really? Let's talk about that. That's where we're at.
That's right.
In Greenland. So that's just his ability. He's a unique individual. I think we're lucky to have someone like that that understands the world the way it is, as opposed to the way we would all like it to be. Mm-hmm. And wants the United States focused on responding to the world and interacting in the world the way it is, which is what makes us capable of achieving peace through strength. And let's talk about the military aspect of the Greenland thing. There are those that say you don't have to have Greenland to do the Golden Dome. That may be true. I'm not an expert on the new system that's been laid down, but we've been looking at missile defense systems for quite some time. And you guys know that it makes common sense. And I guarantee you the president's operating mostly on common sense, where he says, I need Greenland to make sure the Golden Dome does what we said it can do, which is be able to intercept, most of whatever the number is of missiles shot at America, or even Canada for that matter, but primarily at the United States. And if we don't get it, it's a national security problem for me. Not just from the Golden Dome perspective, but from the rare earth minerals, the Chinese trying to implement some kind of Belt and Road piece to their initiative. And you know what they do with that, right? They come into usually a weaker country and they say, hey, we'll build you a deep water port and an airport and some logistics nodes. You just sign this contract with us and it'll be like a loan and you pay it off. Well, the default terms on the loan is that they get ownership of all that infrastructure when the country, like Zimbabwe, defaults on the loan, which is inevitable. Same thing could happen to Greenland. They come in and muscle in.
Vietnam.
Yeah, because the Denmark's not going to stop the Chinese. Heck, half of the EU and NATO is already talking about cozying up to the Chinese even more. So the United States has got to act primarily in its own interest. I like today that he threw out a nugget about NATO, saying he had met with the Secretary General of NATO and they had come to an agreement about Greenland. I anticipate what that looks like. I'm not sure what that looks like because NATO obviously doesn't speak for every European country, but the Secretary General's the political arm of the alliance. It should be interesting what comes out of that. But we have to act in America's interest first, and I think that's what this Greenland piece is all about.
Yeah, I agree completely. And what's the alternative? If you don't build the Golden Dome in Greenland, then you have to build it in Canada, and they're already showing that they're not a reliable ally, at least not right now. And under the Carney leadership, I think that would be challenging. And I think this is why it goes back to sovereignty. This is why I think President Trump is so interested in quote unquote owning Greenland. It's about sovereignty because any lease, any treaty, any agreement can be abrogated and essentially you lose it all, right? And you made all this investment. You can't control access. In other words, it's conditional. Your access is always conditional, not only to whatever contract, quote unquote, you might have agreed to, but whatever the powers that are in at that moment are willing to observe. Whereas if you own it, you own it. And you only answer to yourself and whatever internal process that you might have. And this is the difference. And so when we look at this idea, well, Greenland is part of NATO. Okay, well, maybe you're talking about an island that is 7 times the size of the state of California, and the population of Denmark is 6 million, about the population of, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And so, yes. So essentially what you have is an inability to meet your Article 3 requirements, to be able to defend your own land without the alliance. And so what I think Trump sees here is, I don't know that I can rely on NATO to defend my back door the way NATO relies on us to defend their front door. And this is, I think, the essence of why a NATO promise that, we'll shovel troops in there and we'll do this and we'll do that, just don't try to take Greenland, is still going to be at the whim of whatever NATO leader decides 5 years from now. And I actually think President Trump he's looking 20, 30 years away, right? Golden Dome's a 50-year investment plus. And I think he's wondering, well, who's going to be leading Europe in 50 years? Will NATO even exist in 50 years? Will agreements to do this even have meaning in 50 years? But if I own it, I own it. And I think that's where he's coming from in this regard. And when we look at the behavior of other NATO countries, I pick out the United Kingdom specifically. They have just ceded the Diego Garcia landmass back to the I never can pronounce that country, the Mauritius, I think they are the Mauritius Islands, who are Beijing influenced, and then they're going to turn around and pay them a lease with the promise that we'll still have access to Diego Garcia for the long term. I'm telling you, Rob, the moment that government at the whim of Beijing decides not to honor that lease anymore, we're not only out of runway, we're out of business in the Indian Ocean.
Oh, not just in the Indian Ocean, but Southwest Asia. I've led a squadron from that island a couple of times, and you don't consistently be able to operate long-range strike aviation and sea lift in the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea and up into the Persian Gulf and through up into the Suez Canal and all that without the U.S. being able to control Diego Garcia. And the good news is there's a Chago government. The Chagoians, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, are the ones that actually own that atoll and its surrounding waters. And there is a Chago government in exile that's been formed. Most of them, ironically, are in the UK, and they oppose this move. So that's why the president made a comment the other day. I think I can veto it. Because there's some issue with the agreement and the Chago government. So who's the real Chago government? The Chinese plants that are in place, or is it the exiled Chago folks that are in the UK? And they don't want to do it. They want to keep things the way they are, so the United States can operate freely from there, and the allies too, obviously, do and everything. It's a huge problem. Needs to be talked about more. I see Brent Sadler, the Navy expert, has been talking about it a lot here the last few days. People need to understand exactly what that capability means. Not that I love flying 10,000 miles in the middle of nowhere, but it is what it is. You know, it's a national security interest that from an American perspective is a vital interest. So we can protect our people and our forces in the Pacific and up into Southwest Asia.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
But it is an example of an ally that, is doing things that, is not, that is not without a detriment to American national security. And so
I think that's why NATO is at risk. It really seriously is at risk, and probably should have been deactivated years ago, and something else agreed to take its place amongst the Western allies, because these countries are changing. It takes us all the way back to our original discussion about illegal immigration and legal immigration that's affecting us domestically here. It's affecting the European countries and the United Kingdom even more, which gets into our nuclear strategy. The United Kingdom and France supposedly have their own nuclear weapons. The United Kingdom, we have a contract where we maintain their stuff for them on their sea launch ballistic missiles that they use. There aren't very many of them, but when I look at the United Kingdom today, controlled by quasi-Islamist Marxists, in a lot of cases, I mean, they're almost there. I get really concerned when I look at our nuclear strategy and our nuclear posture. And that's one of the reasons why I endorse you guys' nuclear posture review proposal, is because it sees the world as it really is, instead of seeing it the way we used to see it or the way we want it to be. And we have to acknowledge that. And in the nuclear force structure, our posture, all the way into our acquisitions programs and supply chain, we have to be the coldest that we absolutely have to be in the national security world. All veils have to be lifted, and we have to look at it from the cold, hard perspective of what the reality is. And that's one of the issues that we need to grapple with.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rob, for being our guest. Curtis, sorry we got to close out. That we could talk about this for probably 3 more hours, and maybe we should, Rob. So I'm going to say, up front here, I hope we can have you come back on, because we didn't really get into the NPR, which we would like a little bit of your background on, and find out what your thoughts are, your insights. Because joining us today really opened our eyes, and hopefully opened our audience's eyes to these geopolitical issues that you don't catch in the news, because they don't quite catch the real intent of a lot of the activity that's going on for national security. So from all of us at NIDS, well, you're part of us, but you're, from all the rest of us in NIDS, let me put it that way. We thank you for coming on our podcast. I want to openly here and very seriously thank you for all you do for our country and all you've done for our country.
Right.
I know those sacrifices you make, and it's really important that people realize that you come from this not only as a person just to talk about it, but you've lived it, and that's important to us, and hopefully to our audience to hear that. And you're welcome back anytime. There.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I've got a book coming out. The Pentagon's
fantastic.
holding it hostage right now.
Of course.
Process.
I thought that was the name of the book.
No, but that's a good title.
It is a good title.
It's called What You Can Do About That. And I had to, obviously, with my military background, I used some anecdotes from that I had to get cleared by them. So they're working on it, almost done. When I get that done, I'd love to come back on and talk about the book, give you guys a copy of it, those kind of things, and just do a whole 30-minute discussion on the nuclear posture review document that you all published, because I think it's incredibly important that not just the American people, but folks in the administration hear from the team that put that document together. It's the only thing like it out there in the unclassified world that I'm aware of. And we have to have thinkers that are familiar and experts in this field put their ideas down on paper, and then that paper get into the hands of individuals that are developing the policy and the force structure and the orders to complement all that as we move into the future, because we're behind the times, I think.
We are.
On our nuclear force posture and structure.
Well, that's
Thank
great.
you, Rob.
Again,
Really appreciate that.
Yep. So to all our audience, we thank you for being with us, to our donors, to our supporters, to our listeners, to our producer, Kimberly Charrington. We just thank all of you for listening. Take this information with you. Discuss it with your friends, get the conversation going, because the more awareness we have, the more our citizenry can understand why decisions are being made and help to make our policy decisions better when we have that support of our citizens. Comment to us at nids@thinkdeterrence.com. Visit Rob at www.robmaness.com and listen to his podcast as well. So from all of us to all of you, thank you for visiting us. And remember, we want you to think deterrence.
Thank you for listening to the NIDS View. This show is produced under the NIDS Podcasting Network, a division of the National Institute for Deterrence Studies. NIDS is a 501c3 organization dependent upon donations to provide this podcast and bring about awareness of the peacekeeping value of U.S. strength and our national deterrence. You can catch all of our podcasts or provide feedback at thinkdeterrence.com. I would like to thank our producer, Kimberly Charrington, our sponsors, and all the fantastic members of the National Institute for Deterrence Studies for making this podcast possible. Stay tuned next week for another exciting and informative The NIDS View.
The NIDS Podcasting Network.